Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here. Doing this video because, of course, recently The Walking Dead premiered, and it's been a huge deal lately for most people. It's like, holy crap, they killed. This should be obvious, but I'm just gonna say this is a spoiler warning. That should be obvious based on the title of this video, but it's the internet. So this is an official spoiler warning. But in the premiere, of course, they kill off two characters. They kill Abraham and they kill Glenn. So I saw this episode with my girlfriend. I kind of got her to watch, like, basically, I think it was during the last season I was able to kind of be like, hey, you should really start watching The Walking Dead. So I actually got her to start watching the show, and she caught up last season. So, we were both waiting for this premiere. It's like, who's going to die? What the heck's going to happen? Negan's finally coming in. I was excited to see what they were going to do because I read the comics. So I knew how it initially played out, in the actual comic book. And that was my biggest fear when it ended in the last season. Like, a lot of people, comic book readers or otherwise, a ton of people were mad. And it was like, they built up this whole thing, and then we don't even know who died. So it's like, alright, my biggest fear was that they were just going to do exactly what they did in the comic books, which was just kill Glenn. So it starts up, and, over the summer it was like, oh, it's going to be like this huge thing. We're going to kill one of these, like, really big characters off. And so people were like, alright, everybody thought it was Glenn anyway, so there were multiple elements why I feel like it didn't work, even outside of me being a comic reader. But, they go through all this stuff, and it's like, oh, it's going to be this huge thing and stuff like that, and then it's like, oh, they killed Abraham. And it's like, Abraham undeniably has the best lines ever said in the entire series, but he's not, like, top tier character. So when he got hit, when I was first watching, I was like, oh, it was Abraham. That's not the be-all, end-all of characters, that got killed off. Which, it's funny, too, when you see anything on Facebook, it's all about Glenn because of the way he died and the fact that he was so important. I haven't seen a single thing with Abraham, whether it's about the character or even videos of the actual actor. It's all been Glenn stuff, and it's just kind of funny. It's like, man, nobody cares about the guy who talked about, Bisquick and stuff. That dude's funny. But, when they killed off Abraham, I was like, okay. Didn't see that coming. I was kind of surprised by that, but at the same time, I was like, yeah, it's not that big of a character. I was thinking, and of course everyone had this guess that it would be Abraham because of the taking it like a champ thing, and I was like, it's either going to be Abraham or Michonne. Those are like the two people where I'm like, they're the only ones where I would accept that could happen. And so it ends up being Abraham, like a lot of people expected, because of that line. It's the most likely choice, of course. So that does end up happening, and they kill him, and I'm like, alright, that has an effect, but of course this is like, like I said, he's not a top tier character. And then Daryl acts out, and I was like, oh crap. I was like, holy crap, like, he punched him, he did the freak out, he did the second freak out, which is not free. So I was like, alright, this is about to get crazy, because he's about to kill Daryl, because of course that's who freaked out on him, so he's about to die, and they're about to kill off this character, and that'll be insane, that'll be a huge deal. And instead, which I also, it was just annoying in general because it's one of those situations where it's like, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't. They didn't have a line in there where it's like, I did that to mess with you as well. It was just because it was the comic book thing. Because it makes the most sense. Like, it should have been Daryl that died because he was the one that did it. And instead, they did the comic book thing, and it's like, oh, they're about to kill Daryl. I was super excited because I'm like, this I didn't see coming. This is a very different, outcome as to what's gonna happen. And instead, they kill off Glenn, and I was like, oh, they did the comic book thing. And I was super disappointed. Like, the whole episode, it's supposed to be like this huge thing, and because I read the comics, I was like, I kind of just don't give a crap about this. Like, everyone's like, oh, Glenn, Glenn, Glenn. And I'm just like, whatever. Like, he's been dead to me for like 3 years at this point or longer, whenever I, read that moment in the comics. And it's not that I don't care about the character Glenn in the TV show. It's that I didn't care to see him die in the exact same way that he died before. And especially with it being like this huge cliffhanger. And that's why I kind of hate that I didn't enjoy it. Because it's like, for some reason in my head, I kind of feel like I owe it to the creators to like it. But I don't have to. But it's like, as a comic reader, they basically did the one thing I didn't want them to do. And it's like, why didn't they just do the comic book ending at the season finale? Like, if they did that, it would have been fine. It would have been like, okay, they killed Glenn, but at least it wouldn't have been like this giant weight, especially, like I said, this really only affects people like me, but it somewhat affects people, who actually who don't read the comics and watch it because of all the like fake Glenn deaths and all that stuff. So it was kind of that big thing where it's like, it's still a huge character, so people of course are upset. But then, like, I even watched the video, like a reaction thing, and they're like, it really sucks to see him go. And it's like, yeah, but I guess he had it coming. He almost died like 3 times already. So it's like, even that in itself, for non-comic readers, I felt no one should feel that way. Where it's like, yeah, but he kind of had it coming. Like, no one should, personally at least, I don't think anyone should feel that way when they watch the death of a character. Like, yeah, he survived 3 times, so here it is. And that's why so many people already guessed that it was going to be Glenn. And I was hoping everybody was wrong, because I'm like, I swear if they do something stupid like that, which I gotta be totally honest, I think it was just dumb to have this ginormous cliffhanger and then seriously just do the comic book death. And, the Abraham thing, the fact that there were 2 deaths instead of 1 is really the only difference. But the other half of it is the fact that Abraham was already dead by that point anyway, because he died the same way as the nurse did in the last season in the comic books. That's how Abraham actually dies. So, to me, both deaths were just like, this doesn't actually affect me at all, because they literally just basically caught up on death. So it was like, alright, well, let's use Abraham's death here on this new character. Or, well, she wasn't a brand new character, but on this other character. And then we'll basically catch up on his comic death by killing him here, along with Glenn, and doing the normal comic book thing. And it really disappointed me. Like I said, like, if it was 2 different people, or even if it was 1 different person, if it was anyone that wasn't already dead by that point, I would have thought it was great. Like, if they killed Michonne, that would have been a huge shock, because she wasn't the one who died. If they killed, like, switched it around, let Glenn live longer, and then kill someone else off earlier, or, something like that, that would have been really cool. That would have been really awesome to me. And then, just like I said, watching it, and I was talking to my girlfriend about this, because she doesn't read the comics, so she thought it was really crazy, like a lot of people did, where it's like, this is traumatic and this and that. And excuse me, for me, it's like, this is disappointing. That's what this is. This is kind of like boring and stuff. The best part to me of the most recent episode was actually the ending, because that's not in the comic at all, where they were making like kind of the references to, seemingly making references like Rick getting his hand chopped off and stuff like that, or at least a finger or something. And then they go to the stuff where he has to potentially cut off his son's head, who already lost an eye. So I thought that was great. I figured that he wasn't gonna actually let him do it. I thought he'd literally do like where he'd grab the hatchet in mid swing and be like, all right, now you understand. So I kind of called that he wouldn't actually do it, but that scene I still enjoyed more, because it was like, oh, this is at least brand new. This isn't, they caught up on Abraham's death and then literally just did the typical, I shouldn't say typical, but they did the exact same thing they did in the comic. And that's why I made this video, because I just want to know if I'm crazy, which I know I'm not crazy, because I'm not the only person that thought this. And I think it's just, as a comic reader, that's kind of why it sucks, as a premiere. And even, like I said, for some people who don't read the comics, it was like, oh, like so many people were right about their guess because of, the line, taking like a champ thing. People thought Abraham. And then the other thing with like, oh, Glenn survived so many times. A lot of people didn't expect, 2 deaths, and some people did. But like basically the top 2 people that everyone kept guessing were both the people that died. So it's just like, even in that regard, for non-comic readers, it just didn't seem to, I'm not in the mindset of a non-comic reader, but from what I've heard, it's still, I feel, lacking the impact I think it should have had for people who don't read the comics. And it was just interesting, like, going through that experience and just being like, yeah, this premiere doesn't do it for me. Like, it just did nothing. I was watching it and I'm like, yeah, okay, the special effects are good, and, they did the whole thing where his eye pops out and stuff, and, it went, full comic book style, where he's being the man, they show the hands twitching and all that stuff. I was like, that really falls in line with exactly how gruesome it was in the comic books. And it was just interesting. Like, that was it. It was interesting. It wasn't like mind-blowing or depressing. It was just like, oh, it's the exact same people who died already. and it had no effect on me, and that really sucks. It's not like it's gonna stop me from watching the season, um, but it was so different. It was just like, wow, this has no effect on me, and that really sucks. And as a comic reader, I know I'm not alone because my girlfriend mentioned someone else mentioned, so I think it was probably on Facebook, where they mentioned like, for me, Abraham was already dead, and this is exactly what happened in the comics with Glenn. So they didn't care either. And it was like the exact same thing, where it's like there was no shock value, but pretty much it was just the fact that they both died at the same time. But if you read the comics, it's like all they did was catch up, and technically they only caught up with one person. So it's like half of it was surprising with Abraham dying later, but with him not being that important of a character, it's like, that doesn't matter to me. And then with Glenn dying, and it being exactly the same as the comics, it was like, oh, well, that was supposed to be the epic death, and it's just what I already wanted. What it's actually exactly what I didn't want, because I thought that would be stupid to have. It's not even half the fan base. I don't think it's probably like maybe 20%, possibly 25% of the fan base of this series reads the comics. I wouldn't say it's 50% or even 30%. But for those people who are a huge chunk, like a lot of those people, I'm sure were watching the series when it first started because they read the comics. Because the comics were super far in when the series even first started. Like I think Negan was already introduced into the comic series when the TV show was in its second season or something like that. In between seasons, possibly. So there were a ton of people watching that show that already watched the comic or already read the comics, and then to have that base probably even build. Like I didn't read the comics until after I started watching the show because I liked the show so much. I was like, I want to know the original story and how everything plays out. So it's kind of crazy just going through it, and it's like, man, to have such a giant chunk of your fan base be from the original source material, and to have what everyone, most people at least, like 90% of people hated it, whether they read the comics or not, that last cliffhanger, to do that and to go into this and just do the exact same thing as they did in the comics was insanely disappointing to me. So I just wanted to do a video about that and talk about how I really wish both deaths were different. I wish it was anybody else. Like they could have killed, I mean, even if they killed Abraham, if the important death was something, it would have been fine. Like, alright, the Abraham death still wouldn't have been anything at all to me, because even if they killed, Rosita, that still would have been surprising to me, more surprising than them killing off Abraham, because it's like, holy crap, I know for a fact that she wasn't dead at this point, and they killed her. So stuff like that is insanely different, just like with Andrea. She dies totally different than she does in the comics, because, at least as far as I know, as far as I've gotten up to, she's still not dead. So stuff like that is, I mean, they kind of made her character sort of iffy, how they did her character. But stuff like that where characters die way earlier or die in totally different ways, like Lori, it's entertaining to watch because it's like, oh, that character did die, but at least it was in a totally different manner. And, like I said, I guess with Abraham, because it was meant to be upstaged by this epic death of a top tier character, it made his already, sort of catch-up death, it made it even less impactful than it was for me, which was not at all anyway, because I was like, oh, that's the big death? That's not the big thing. And then thinking Daryl was going to die, that was actually really cool, and I was like, holy crap. And then it just ended up being Glenn, and instantly I was super excited, and then it was like, oh, it's Glenn. And this went from something super awesome and surprising to exactly what I hated, or exactly what I was hoping they wouldn't do. And it's just like, man, just thinking about how I felt when that season finale happened, and I was just like, I swear if they do, Glenn's death, I'm gonna hate it. That'll be stupid. And that's what they did. I mean, even including Abraham's death, which, like I said, that in itself is not that impactful because he's not that big of a character. And honestly, I liked his death better in the comics because it was such a crazy shock. Because it was the way they did the character Denise in the last season. It was out of nowhere. It was just like, alright, yeah. And then he gets an arrow through the head. That was way more surprising. There wasn't the tension to it. It was just like, holy crap. He's dead. I remember reading that scene and I was like, holy crap. You just read it and then the next panel, he just has an arrow through his head. And I was like, holy crap. I don't know what to think right now because They were just having a conversation, and he was killed in the middle of his words. He's dead, and it's just like with that old episode. I was like, holy crap, that's just something you don't see coming. So to have that, replaced with the any meeny miny mo thing, and for it to be him, bit of a shock, but for it to just instantly be overshadowed by the top tier character who is the exact same top tier character that was dead to me like 2 years ago, it just didn't have the impact I wish it did. Like, I truly wish I was like blown away by this episode and loved it and this and that, and it was just like, there's no reason this, as many liberties as they take to switch around the stories. One of the biggest moments in the entire franchise, they do exactly the same. They don't do a cool epic switch or anything. It's like, no, let's just do it exactly the same way. At least for the the truly epic moment, which is of course Glenn's death and not Abraham's. Let's just do it the exact same way. Same character. It's cool that they did follow the panels and stuff, but it's just like, man, it's a huge level of disappointment for me, and that really sucks. I'm gonna watch it though, because I want to see that effing tiger. There's some things that they do in the comics, and I don't know how it's gonna work. Obviously it's gonna be some CG, probably 100% CG, but there are just some moments where I'm like, I just want to see that play out. So, and I want to see the rest of the series in general. It's not like this. That's the only reason is because it's a freaking tiger. I want to see the rest of the series in general, but number one is like, I don't care about Negan. I want to see that freaking tiger, and I want to see it kill a human and a zombie. That's what I want to see. I need one zombie death by tiger, one human death by tiger. Everything else is whatever. Everything else is filler at this point. But I want to know what you guys thought about the premiere. If you're a comic book reader, I would love to know how you felt about it. Like, were you disappointed like me? Were you surprised? Were you happy that they killed off Glenn? Because honestly, and I won't spoil, how things play out, but I was really hoping that that would be, one of the biggest changes, because I'm like, man, as much as they've changed, I would love to see Glenn continue to live on and actually be with his child, and how that would change, the series. That would have been amazing, because it wouldn't just be, holy crap, they killed this character. As a comic reader, it would be like, Glenn living would be a huge change for the series, and that's probably why they didn't do it. They didn't want to go with such an epic change, although they've done so many epic changes where characters do totally different things and stuff like that, or characters even exist or have died long before they died, in the comics. So they've done those types of changes before where like it literally changes the entire series because they killed someone at a different point, or they made someone like Daryl who didn't even exist before, stuff like that. So they've already done a million of those different things. They've created, like the character Noah, he never existed. That hospital stuff, none of that happens, in the comic book. So they've already done a million different things where they've added arcs to the series or switched around moments that, giant moments, and, maybe switched the places of them. So they could have done that. And it just sucks that they didn't. They just did honestly, the crappy cliffhanger, which I hated like everybody else, comic book reader or not. And then I come back into it and it's like, oh wow, I hated the cliffhanger and I was still disappointed by the premiere. Whereas we're non-comic readers, we're probably okay with it. Like, traumatized, sure, but at least okay with it. Like, that was at least something really crazy and epic I wasn't expecting. And for me, it was like, okay, I didn't think they'd kill two people. That was cool. But both deaths were like irrelevant to me. And it's like, ugh. So, want to know if you feel the same way as a comic reader. If you're not a comic reader, I would still love to know what you thought about it. Like, if it impacted you like a crazy way. If you had the correct guess. As much as I would have hated to have seen it happen, I would have loved it if they killed Michonne. That would have blew my freaking mind. Because that's a top tier character that lives through that situation. So if it was any of the other characters, even if it was a lesser character, like I said, if Rosita died and it wasn't Abraham, that still would have had more of an impact. And they've done nothing with her character at this point in the series. I think she had way more relevant moments in the comic book by this point. It's kind of the same, but they just seemed to focus on it a bit longer because it's a comic book form. It seemed like they took the time to focus on it a little more than, hey, this is a TV show. Screw the side characters, focus on the main character. So I felt like even if it was the same sort of storyline, there was more to it in the comic book side of things. So even with her lessened relevance in the actual TV version, still would have been really awesome. If they killed Sasha, she doesn't exist in the comics either. That would have been crazy. Any of the characters except for the two that died, I would have been like, holy crap, didn't see that coming. That's awesome. And it's just so sad that I was so disappointed by it. Yet I still want to freaking see them kill a bunch of zombies with a tiger. But like I said, want to know what you guys thought about the premiere. If you're a comic reader, want to know if you're disappointed. Who would you have preferred to have gotten killed off? Both, since they did one, top tier character and then a second tier character. Who would you have picked? Well, you have your top tier characters. If you want to throw in Rick or Carl, you can do that too. I know a lot of people are like, I would love it if they just killed Rick off or Carl. But one top tier character and one second tier character, which ones would you have switched around and like it would have kind of blown you away, or would you have preferred? Some people like to have other characters just gone, like get rid of them. I'm tired of them. Whatever. Want to know what you guys would have changed around for non-comic readers? Like I said, would love to know how you guys felt about this, how blown away you were, how disappointed or happy you were, or at least surprised, maybe not happy, but at least surprised based on the results. And, what you're thinking about it in general, like where you stand right now based on the deaths, what you're expecting, what you got. So, definitely want to know that. So please, comment below, let me know, and of course, thanks for watching.